Okay, this is a review of the 2022 movie To Leslie. It's directed by Michael Morris. The writing, screenplay by Ryan Minako. And in the cast, in the lead role of Leslie is Angela Riseborough. Her son, James, aged about 13, is played by Drew Youngblood. Leslie's father, Raymond, is played by Tom Virtue, and her mother, Helen, is played by Lauren Lethero. Then we have some other significant members of the cast. We have Nancy, played by Alison Janney. You'll remember her from The West Wing. Dutch, her boyfriend, is played by Stephen Root. And the motel manager, Sweeney, is played by Pramod Kamur. Sorry, that's not correct. Sweeney is played by Mark Maron, and he is the project manager. His friend, who is the owner of the motel, is Royale, and he's played by Andre Royale. And there will be a slide of the details with regard to the cast in this particular movie. Just briefly, the beginning of the movie is very significant, but is very short in time duration. We see a series of photos featuring a young Leslie at a point in her life when the future seems to be bright. The world's her oyster. We see her at the prom. We see her some years later carrying her newborn son, James. And then there's footage of a local TV news footage of her on the day she hit the lotto and she won $190,000. So she was that much richer. And she is asked what her plans are with regard to the loot. And her answer, I don't know, maybe buy a house, get something nice for my boy, just have a better life. So to Leslie then. And after that initial intro, we then switch to her being evicted from her room. She's clearly the worse for wear from drink, and there is a wildness in her reaction. Very not too dissimilar from her reaction when she won the money. She's a woman with a volatile emotional sort of temper, and whether she's winning or losing, she's emotionally very, very uptight and upbeat. We then switch to a bar where she's wallowing in her own sort of self-pity, although she is showing some alluring views towards the men within the bar. And I was particularly impressed by the music whilst the camera gloats over her. It was I'm Going Down, which seems to sum up perfectly her state. She then, after getting a fair fistful of ale, she then seeks out her son for refuge. He's quite amenable to her staying, and we witness some clever direction where there's an intense focus on their faces in the car as they go towards his place of residence. Once at the apartment, he has to then go to work, and we witness her and the physical mess that she's got herself in. And before he leaves, he lays down just a couple of ground rules: that she can stay as long as she wants, but only to make a plan for the future. And secondly, crucially, he states clearly that there's to be no alcohol, and off he goes to work. And of course, she's unable to keep up with the second part, and there's a scene when he comes back from work and finds her not there, and she's in fact gravitated to a room down the corridor where there are two men who are alluring all over her, and she indulges in their free alcohol. He then frantically starts to look for her, and then he puts two and two together, goes back to the room. They had previously said that she wasn't there, and the cat is out of the bag, so to speak, and he becomes aware that she has been indulging in alcohol there. So he then finds that he just can't tolerate this, and he contacts an old friend of the family and of Leslie, and arranges to put her on a Greyhound bus, and she is then sent back to the town where she was brought up, and where they all know vividly about her demise after the win on the lottery. What follows then is her arrival at the town, and there she immediately is back with these old friends who have very much turned against her following her inability to look after her young child. Their names are Nancy and Dutch, and Nancy, of course, as I referred to earlier, is played by the exceptionally talented Alison Janney, who I spent many years drooling over because of her performance in The West Wing. The two of them are on short fuses and have sort of reluctantly taken her in, but aren't prepared to tolerate any sort of obnoxious behaviour. They're part of a biker fraternity, so clearly Leslie was also involved in that, but she's now become the black sheep. And she quickly gets the opportunity to gravitate to a bar and drinks constantly, and tries to attract men. And this behaviour is particularly obnoxious, although it has to be said at this point that Riseborough's performance as an alcoholic, down on her luck, so to speak, and very self-indulgent, is superb. She eventually, of course, her attempts to drunkenly flirt with men leads to them slipping away from her, as they can see that it's basically a big problem down the road, albeit if they want to indulge in some free sex. So not long after this episode, she's locked out with her case outside. Dutch and Nancy have basically had enough, and she then has to hit the road. And she then comes into contact with a motel, and two of the occupants ends up sleeping outside with her case beside her, and then wanders off, and her case is retrieved by one of the two men that run this motel, and one of them is clearly gay, but it appears that Sweeney has taken on the role of sort of warden of the complex, which has lots of small rooms for occasional stays, whether it be for short-time sex or whether it be for visitors to the area. And inadvertently, what follows is her being offered a job by Sweeney to become a motel maid. And this sort of acts as a sort of real opportunity for her to turn her life round. However, she's quite manipulative and has gauged that Sweeney maybe has half an eye on her, and so she negotiates an advance on her salary, and of course inevitably ends up squandering it in the bar. The local bar there, she's despised and hated, and the consequence of this, well, she doesn't get up in time for work at 8, and is subject to one or two sort of reminders by Sweeney. And eventually he can't tolerate it as this behaviour is repeated. But eventually what transpires is he gives her a final opportunity to take advantage of this job offer, and it's quite a poignant scene. Particularly I noted when she returned to the room and looked at a photo of her son as a boy, sort of a memory really that's kept her going in these adverse circumstances. She then asked Sweeney to assist her in going cold turkey on the booze, and their relationship moves from a employer-employee status to more of a friendship. And he stays in her room to prevent her from going out in an attempt to tackle the alcohol withdrawal symptoms. We then catch them both at a country sort of hoedown, and they end up having a dance, and then Leslie receives a pack of vitriol from some of the locals in there who remember her past, her murky past, her alcoholism, and her basically not caring for her child. She's then put in a fight or flight situation, and she decides to leave, and is torn by the fact that the community don't appear to want to forgive her, want to enable her to have a second chance. And the latter part of the movie looks at how she almost gets to the end of her tether as she once again seeks solace at the bar, but does a U-turn out of the bar and shows some real inner strength, and then asks Sweeney if she can take the ice cream shop that's been left sort of derelict on as a business venture. He agrees, and there's a very much a U-turn in the story. She spends a lot of hard graft getting this shop ready for a sort of a breakfast canteen type cafe, and then on the day that it opens, of course, no one comes. But then just as she's about to give up again, and she's been tempted by the hip flask owned by Royale, but again she declines to get smashed, and then she has a customer, and it's Nancy, and we have this scene where the two of them sort of pour out their heart to each other and regret for their behaviour towards each other in the past. And shortly after, Nancy then brings in her son James, and we have a final sort of scene where the two of them come together united, and it's an emotional sort of conclusion to what was a very interesting film. I particularly like the way that Riseborough handles the alcohol. It isn't too excessive, aka Days of Wine and Rollers, but you're clearly aware of the impact that it had on her. So that's my take on the movie from 2022 to Leslie.